Hello, and blessings to you. In this video, we're going to cover chapters 4 and 5 in our first Hebrew primer textbook. Before we get started, I want to remind you to keep practicing the alphabet until it comes pretty easily for you. And if you have any questions about this video, just make a note about it, and you can either email it to me straight away or ask me during class. So let's get started. First, we are going to go through our vocabulary words. Now, what we're going to do is I will read the word aloud, and I'll pause. Hopefully, you will read it aloud after me. Then I'll give the definition, and then if you'll repeat the definition as well. So first we have Avraham, Abraham. Ish, man. Bait, house. Bain, son. Davar means word or thing. David is David. Who is he or it. Zakar means he remembered. Malak, he ruled or reigned. Melech is king. Na'ar, young man. Amad, stood. Shema, he heard or listened. Shamar, he guarded or kept. Alright, so you'll notice that our textbook gives us a little note here about the accent marks. So for the words that are, if you remember last week in class, that words are typically accented on the last syllable. So when words are not accented on the last syllable, you'll have this little accent mark right here at the top of the word. Alright, so the next thing we're going to get into is the Hebrew sentence. So to move forward in this textbook, you're going to have to learn a little Hebrew grammar or refresh some Hebrew grammar. So we're going to be talking about subjects and verbs. Alright? So like English, in Hebrew, a sentence is a complete thought. Alright? So it's not just David, it's David remembered. David zakar. I'll read the rest of these in Hebrew, and I'm sure that you can read them in English right there. Hu amad. Ish shema. Melech malak. Abraham shamar. So you'll notice, especially on that fourth example right here, Melech and Malak sound very similar. So the first one here is the noun, king, and the second one is the verb, ruled. So you could kind of think about it as like the ruler ruled, or a ruler ruled in this case. Alright? So, unlike in English, in Hebrew, the verb is usually at the beginning of the sentence. It usually precedes the subject. So rather than having David zakar, like we did up here, you might see zakar David. So you can see these are the same words, just the order has flip-flopped. Similarly, hu amad, amad hu. Okay, so moving on, so the subject of a sentence is typically a noun or a pronoun. So a noun is a word that names a person, place, thing, object, idea, such as Abraham, man, house, son. And those are the ones from this chapter. Word, thing, David, king, young man. Pronouns, on the other hand, replace a noun in a sentence. So maybe we've already said Abraham, so we don't have to say Abraham again. We can just say he. So he, she, and it are pronouns. So the only one in chapter 4 would be who, which means he. Okay? A verb describes the action of the subject. All right, so the verb in this sentence is remembered. So the verbs in this chapter are zakar, he remembered, malak, he ruled, amad, he stood, shema, he heard, shamar, he guarded or kept. So far, you can see this is not too complicated. Now, we're not going to get too much into verbs in this chapter, but what we will talk about are there are only 2 tenses in Hebrew, just 2. And that's your perfect tense and your imperfect tense. So the perfect tense describes completed action, and the imperfect tense describes incompleted action. So typically, we might think of the perfect tense as things that have happened in the past, and the imperfect tense as things that have happened in the present or the future that have yet to happen. It's not exactly true though, but for this textbook we're going to treat that as if that's the case. But I will say up front here that it could describe present completed action, so I'm talking about the perfect tense. The perfect tense could describe present completed action or even future completed action. So something to keep in mind. Now in English, we have a lot of different ways of talking about the past, but in Hebrew it is just this one way. It's this perfect tense. So in Hebrew we might say David shamar. And if we were translating this, we could say David guarded, David was guarding, David had guarded, David has guarded. All right, so we have a lot of flexibility in English for just these 2 words in Hebrew. Okay. Next, we'll talk about the definite article. So in English, we have an indefinite article, a or an. In Hebrew, there is no indefinite article. There is only a definite article. So in English, the definite article is the. In Hebrew, it is a hey with a patak underneath it and a dagesh forte in the next letter. All right, so you see these examples. We have melech right here and ha-melech. So melech is king. It could just be king, or it could be a king, because there is no indefinite article. Sometimes we might treat it in English as if there were one. So this could be king or a king. All right, but with the definite article here, ha-melech, we'll add the English definite article, the. I think that's fairly straightforward. So coming down to these examples, if we add ha-na'ar, we get ha-na'ar, the young man. Here's the definite article to davar, ha-davar. Ha-bain is ha-bain, the son. Ha-bayit is ha-bayit, the house. So far so good, right? Now if you remember though, last week we talked about the 5 gutturals. These gutturals cannot take a dagesh. And so because of that, we get what's called compensatory lengthening. So the vowel underneath is no longer a patak, it can become a kametz or a shagol. So here we have the word ish. It becomes ha'ish, but notice there's a commas here instead of the patak. Here we have ir, and we have ha'ir, the city. Arim, he'arim. Alright, so the dagesh is only dropping out because it cannot be in one of these guttural letters. It does not change the meaning at all. So if you still notice that we have the definite article on this word, it is still a definite noun in this case. Okay, we also have some nouns that are always definite. So in English we call those proper nouns. These are your words that you can't use in Scrabble. Alright, so Lake Michigan, Missouri, California, or proper names as well. So Abraham. So here we have Ha'ish Zakar, the man remembered. Below it we have Abraham Zakar, Abraham remembered. We have Hamelech Ahmad, the king stood, and David Ahmad, David stood. So all of these are definite. But you'll notice they don't all have the definite article, and that's because what we just talked about, Abraham and David are already definite by nature because they are proper nouns. Okay? Well, let's move on to chapter 5. So we're going to do the same thing. We'll go over the vocab first, and then kind of run through this chapter. So first we have Av, means father or ancestor. And you'll notice now the author is giving us whether this is masculine or feminine. So father or ancestor is masculine. El means two. Isha means woman or wife. Behema, animal, cattle. Bat means daughter. He means she or it. Halak means walked or went. He walked, he went. Yerushalayim is Jerusalem. Min, from. Mitzrayim, Egypt. Mishpacha, family. Na'ara, young woman. Ruth, Ruth. Sarah, Sarah. Alright, before we move on, I would like to give you guys a fun mnemonic device for memorizing these pronouns. Okay, so the pronouns, remember again, are he, she, and it. So it goes, let me find a place to write this, sorry. Let's write it right over here. Who is he? He is she? And me is who? So again, that is who is he is she, me is who. Just something to hopefully help you remember the differences between these. So a couple notes down here. So there are a few variant spellings of the noun Jerusalem. No matter which way you see it, both will be pronounced Yerushalayim. Alright? Okay, moving on. So the next thing to talk about is that nouns have a gender. Nouns and verbs in Hebrew have a gender. So we don't really see this too often in English. You can see a few examples here. But typically, a noun is just a noun in English, and there's not a gender to it. In Hebrew, every noun will either have a masculine or a feminine gender. Okay? And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has male or female qualities to it. It's just a way that this language works. Alright, so for example, davar is a masculine word, and so it will follow the masculine rules. Mishpacha is a feminine word, and it follows the feminine rules. Alright, so again, they want to bring up that there's nothing male or female about word, davar, or family, mishpacha. It's just every word has to have a gender, and you have to memorize what those genders are. Luckily, to help us, there are some rules. Okay, so generally, a noun ending in comments hey, so here's the comments, there's the hey, is a feminine noun. So na'ara, young woman, is a feminine noun. Mishpacha, family, is feminine. Also, nouns that end in a tav are also feminine. Emet, truth. Bat, daughter. Finally, the names of cities or countries are usually feminine, not always, but usually. So Yerushalayim, Mitzrayim. So these are feminine nouns. So, in general, if it ends in a comments hey, or a tav, or is the name of a city or a country, it's going to be a feminine noun. Unfortunately, there are not very cut and dry rules for masculine nouns. So basically, if it doesn't have those recognizable endings, it's probably a masculine noun. Now, that's not always going to be the case, and so because of that, it will be important to memorize the gender as you memorize your words. Alright? Okay. Well, just like the nouns, the verbs will also have a gender. But the verbs can have either of the forms, both of the forms actually. Alright? So our masculine verbs are what we've already learned in the vocab from chapter 4. They have a comments patak, vowels. Alright? So if you notice, the difference between the masculine and feminine verbs are going to be the vowels. So we could have zakar or zakra. Okay? So zakar is the masculine, zakra is the feminine. So with the masculine, we can have a comments in the first slot, and then a patak under the second root letter, are what these are called. With feminine, we'll have a comments, shava, and then a comments again. So, before I tell you, kind of make a guess to yourself, do you think this is a vocal or a silent shava? Well, typically, it's going to be ending the first syllable, and for that reason, it will be a silent shava. So, let's just read some of these out loud. Up here with the masculine verbs, we have shama, zakar, halak, shamar, amad, malak. Now for those same words but feminine, we have shama, zakra, halcha, shamra, amda, malka. So notice the difference between these sounds. Shamar, shamra. Okay? You will need to memorize this, alright? So for masculine, it is comets patak. For feminine, comet shava comets. Now we're going to go into verbs in more detail in a couple weeks. So for now, this is all that you need to know. And I don't think our author has said this, but these are the perfect tense. All right. So this is a perfect third masculine is how we would kind of parse this out. So we could put who in front of these ones. Who shama, who zakar, he remembered. Who halak, he went. He shama, she heard. He zakra, she remembered. All right, makes sense? So, just like in English, our subject and verbs have to agree, and they have to agree with person, number, and gender. So, we could say he, so who Ahmad, he stood, and then he amda, she stood. David guarded, David shamar, or Sarah guarded, Sarah shamra. All right? And just to remind you, I hope you're reading these out loud after I say them, because practice is really how you're going to nail this down. So something I kind of hinted at earlier is every Hebrew word is built off of 3 root letters. So Hebrew is a language of roots. So if you notice, well, let's see, what would be a good example? When we were talking about, I think it was in chapter 4, our vocabulary words, we have malak and melek. Notice those are the same consonants, right? We have a mem, lamed, kaf, mem, lamed, kaf. The only difference are the vowels here. So we just talked about the masculine perfect form. So we know malak. Well, the noun version of malak is melek. So this is a good example of these roots. So the root would be mem, lamed, kaf. So mem, lamed, kaf is the root of these words. Okay? And I guess I could have just stayed right here because the textbook breaks that down for us. So here we have mem, lamed, kaf is malak, he ruled. Melek, king. Malkut, kingdom. Shin, mem, resh, shamar, he guarded. Shomer is a guard. Mishmar, prison. So here, it's a little different, and we'll get more into this later, but if you take away this first letter, you'll see that shin, mem, resh. All right. Ayin, mem, dalet, amad, he stood. Amud is a pillar, so something that helps something stand. Omed, a standing place. Zayin, kaf, resh, we have zakar, he remembered. Zeker, remembrance. And zikaron is a memorial, so something that you remember. So again, we have an ending here, but you notice that zayin, kaf, resh is the same in the other ones. So from here on out, our textbook is going to give you the verbal root instead of giving you the masculine perfect form. So up to this point, we've learned it as shema. And one thing I don't know if the textbook talked about, but Shema actually has an understood he in it. The verb has an understood noun to it. So actually, this could be a sentence all on its own. Shema, he heard. All right? Okay. Well, let's run through really fast the series of verbs, okay? So obviously here is the root, the masculine singular perfect, and the feminine singular perfect, okay? So shin, mem, ayin, shama, sham'a. Shin, mem, resh, shamar, shamra. Mem, lamed, kaf, malak, malka. Hey, lamed, kaf, halak, halka. Zayin, kaf, resh, zakar, zakra. Ayin, mem, dalet, amad, amda. And hopefully you're putting the pieces together and you know what at least some of these words mean at this point. Shema, he heard. Shamar, he guarded. And notice there's only one letter difference here, right? So be careful about that. Couple things and then we'll be done. So in English, and other conjunctions are separate words. In Hebrew, that is not always the case. So Hebrew has a system of prefixes and suffixes that we'll get into more detail. One of the possible prefixes is the word and in English. And to say and, the conjunction, we would simply need a vav and a shawah. So av is father or a father. Va'av is and father or and a father. Notice this is a vocal shawah. This is not a silent one. So up here I don't think we talked about in this final kaf. I don't know if you saw this shawah, but it is a silent one. Here at the beginning of the word, though, this is going to be a vocal one. Va'av. We have Hamelech, the king. So we have Melech, which is king, Hamelech, the king, Vahamelech, and the king. Could you guess what and a king would be? Basically, we could just ignore this and technically take the dagish out, and it would just be Vamelech. Alrighty. So normally, that's how you're going to see it, is a vav and a shava. Alright? So here we have David va'Avraham va'Rut. David amad va'hu halak. Hana'ar va'hana'ara. Okay? So typically, it's going to look like that. Sometimes, though, you will see it as a shurik instead of a shava underneath it. And when you see it like that, it is pronounced as a shurik, just as an u, not as a vu. So the vav completely disappears. Good example of this is in the Shema in Deuteronomy 6. We might go over that sometime as an example of this. So, and additionally, so it's not just a shurik, it can also be vi, va, ve, ve, or va. Now, none of this changes the meaning, it's still the conjunction. And in this textbook, they want you to just think of it as and. Later, we might learn some more words that we might translate this as. But it's the conjunction, and. But the meaning is not changed, even though the spelling is changed. So, expect this. Don't be surprised if you see any of this. Alright? So we have, down here we have bain vabat. Or I'm sorry, bain ubat. I still didn't pronounce it right. Bain ubat. Alright? Because that doesn't have the dagesh there. Here we have David va Yerushalayim. So actually here, so I mispronounced this one as well. Here, our vowels kind of merge together, and this becomes Virushalayim. David Varushalayim. Alright? Down here we have Bait Uvehema. So notice here your vocabulary word is behema for cattle or animal. But because of the vav here, that dagesh lene disappears. And so this is a V sound instead of a B sound. Uvehema. Uvehema. Alright? So this next one, davar ve'emet. A word and a truth. Alright, moving on. So one of your vocabulary words is mean. It is the preposition from, but it actually has two forms. So it can be a separate word, as you've learned it in your vocabulary, mean, but it can also be attached to another word. So to do that, we would have a mem, hirik, and a dagesh in the next letter. Another way, though, is a mem and a tsere. So here are the examples. Mibait, meish, mehamelek, min habait, min haish, min hamelek. Alrighty, last thing to talk about. So remember I taught you up here we have this nice mnemonic device for who is he is she, me is who. You probably already noticed, and hopefully if you've started memorizing your vocabulary, which you should, that both who for he and he for she can mean he or it, she or it. And that's because in Hebrew, there is no separate word for it. So instead of having a word for it, they just simply use who, if it's a masculine it that it's referring to, or he, if it's a feminine it that it's referring to. Okay, so here's some examples. Habayit amad vahu shamar mishpacha. So that is, the house stood and it guarded a family. Okay, so this it is not and he guarded a family. This is referring back to house. And because house is masculine, we have a masculine it. Okay? This next example is Hamishpacha zakra vahi halcha el Yerushalayim. So the family remembered and it, vahi, and it walked or went to Jerusalem. Okay? So just remember that based on context is really how you'll be able to figure stuff like this out. Who or he could also stand for it. Okay? And remember, these are our pronouns. Alright? Well, blessings to you. And I will see you in class.